Hello, and welcome to A Blast to the Past on NAP's Daily News Show. I am going to inform you on the life of Queen Elizabeth I. Today, we are focusing on the Renaissance time in England, mainly Queen Elizabeth I and her time while being queen. Most people, especially Americans, do not know much about the English Renaissance. An important person having to do with this time period was Queen Elizabeth I. Queen Elizabeth was not automatically queen. She had a short time of her life before she was crowned. As we look into the past, we can learn a lot about a famous person who lived so long ago. Elizabeth I was the last Tudor monarch. She was the daughter of King Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn. When she was born, it was a disappointment to everyone because everyone was expecting and hoping for a boy. Elizabeth I was named after both of her grandmothers. Her mother, Anne, was the second wife of Henry VIII, and he had 4 more wives to follow. Anne was locked up in the Tower of London, accused of treason by Henry VIII. She was executed, leaving Elizabeth without a mother. Queen Elizabeth lived for 69 years, which was a long time for many people back in the day. She was born on the 7th of September in 1533. The mother of Elizabeth I Anne Boleyn was executed on the 19th of May in 1536, not even 3 years after Elizabeth was born. Her father was king from 1509 to 1547. The next in line for the throne was the half-brother of Elizabeth, Edward VI. He was only 9 years old when he became king and only lasted on the throne for a total of 6 years. After Edward VI was king, Mary I, half-sister of Elizabeth, was queen for only 5 years. Elizabeth became the queen in 1558 and reigned for 45 years until she died on the 24th of March in 1603. Mary had died on November the 17th, 1558, and Elizabeth became the queen that day. But her coronation was not held until the middle of January in 1559. Queen Elizabeth was born in Greenwich, England, but while she was growing up, she did not live with her parents in London. She was raised about 10 miles outside of London at Hatfield Royal Palace. Even though she did not live with her parents, her mother sent her most of her clothes. Her mother died when she was very young, so she did not get to spend quality time growing up with her. During the reign of Mary I, Elizabeth was put into the Tower of London to be executed. She was put in this tower after being accused of being a traitor, plotting to kill the queen. Now, these accusations were not true, and later, Elizabeth was released from the tower, and shortly after that, she became queen. She was crowned queen in Westminster Abbey as well as being buried there after her death. Elizabeth died in Richmond Palace in Surrey, England.
Hello, my name is Anna Morielli, reporting live for NAP. Queen Elizabeth of England was coronated at age 25, January 15, 1559, in Westminster Abbey, London. During her time as ruler, Queen Elizabeth brought about key events that helped to change her country. When she was brought to power, Elizabeth changed the official religion from Catholic to Protestant, the religion she practiced, and brought Protestants out of the fear of punishment they held during her half-sister Mary's rule. Although many thought marriage would be the only suitable path for this queen, Elizabeth never married and learned to use this to her advantage. She would often enter into marriage negotiations with other countries to bring England and that country closer together, but would never actually go through with the marriage. For example, twice she entered into negotiations with 2 French princes, which led to slightly less hostility between the countries. She also entered into the Anglo-Spanish War with Spain in 1585, although she wished to keep England in a state of peace. During the first 10 years of her reign, the relationship between Spain and England began to deteriorate. Due to conflict over the Netherlands, activity of Elizabeth's sea dogs, and the hatred between the Catholics and the Protestants. Although the war was never officially declared, many historians agreed it began when Elizabeth gave her support to the rebels in Netherlands and Prince Philip II of Spain sent in the Spanish Armada to attack. There was never declared a winner, but the Spanish navy was essentially destroyed. This gave England the most powerful navy in the world and led to Elizabeth creating the English Empire. In her time as ruler, Elizabeth also beheaded her cousin, Queen Mary of Scots, enlisted explorers such as Sir Francis Drake, and created a support system for the needy. Queen Elizabeth ruled until 1603 when illness overcame her. However, she will always be remembered as a great and wise ruler, a successful woman in what was, at the time, very much a man's world.
Hello viewers of America, my name is Summer Martin, and today I will be talking about the Elizabethan times and their costume and fashion. I'd say this time period ranged from in the 1500s to the early 1600s. The clothes they wore in this era were extremely different from what we wear today, to say the least. The Elizabethan time period was dominated by class structure, so the people who lived in this era could not wear whatever they wanted to. The fabrics and clothes one could wear was based on their rank in the social milieu of this time. Even if somebody was as rich as the Duke and wasn't noble enough, they couldn't wear a certain clothing. What someone could wear was even enforced by English laws, called the sumptuary laws. In other words, it was illegal to wear certain clothes. These laws were strictly obeyed, consequences including loss of property, fines, and even a life sentence. So, what were these clothes? How did they fit? And what did they look like? Like I said earlier, class systems have different kinds of clothes. In the 1540s, for Elizabethan women, their clothes exaggerated a tiny waist and emphasizing hips. The clothes were very stiff. The padding restricted the wearer's movement considerably. Later in the 1580s, the sleeves went huge and the waist went even tinier. The ruffles along the neck also got large, extending a foot long from the neck. These fabrics were heavily patterned. Rich women wore their hair pulled back and teased into curls. Here's an example of a dress that a woman would wear. There would be a cuff along the neckline extending a foot long, a line of decoration joining the sleeve to the bodice. Huge shoulders to make the waist look even tinier, sleeves gathered at the wrist with a ruffle at the end, a long skirt covering the shoes with a kirtle or forepart down the middle here with a different pattern fabric. For men, on the other hand, their underclothes consisted of skirt, stockings, a coat-piece, and a corset. Their overclothes were a doublet, separate sleeves, breeches, a belt, a ruff, a cloak, shoes, and a hat. I also brought pictures of what different kinds of classes of people would wear in this time. Here's a picture of Queen Elizabeth. This is an everyday outfit she would wear. Here you can see her huge sleeves and her tiny waist. Queen Elizabeth, because she is the highest ranked woman, will have the most exaggerated and extravagant look. Here's a picture of a rich woman in this time. You can see that she still has a very fancy dress on, but not as fancy as something Queen Elizabeth would wear. Now here's a picture of a poor woman. Notice how there is no jewelry, and look, the hat she is wearing covers her hair. But the dress still focuses on a small waist and large hips. The feminine look back then was to have tiny waists and large hips. That is why no matter how rich or how poor, a woman's dress always has the same basic look. That's all the time I have now on this subject, but stay tuned for more.
Good afternoon, America. My name is Grace Haas from NAP News, and I would have to encourage you to stop what you are doing and watch this broadcast. You see, lately there have been some concerns about a disease known as the bubonic plague making its rounds again. Now, before you panic, do not turn off the TV. I'm here to provide you with some essential information that will be needed in the near future if we plan to keep the state of Pennsylvania free of the Black Plague. Let's start off with some basics. You might ask, for example, where the plague first hit. The first major outbreak of the plague began in Europe during the year of 1563. During this period, Queen Elizabeth held reign over the sickly land while Shakespeare was busy writing his elaborate, very confusing plays. The plague was spread around Europe by a bunch of infected rats, believe it or not. That leads into my first tip for all you viewers out there. Buy more rat traps. You see, the rats that littered the streets of London, England, were diseased. These rats attracted fleas, who then dug into a meal of sickly rat. Yum. The fleas then, in turn, flew around until they became hungry again, bit an innocent passerby, and thus infected us humans. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, although this occurred approximately 450 years ago in Europe, we must still take precautions to keep it out of our state. Another major question that I must address is symptoms. What happens to those who develop it, you ask? Well, it can begin with something as simple as some chills. Maybe a headache and a slight fever will cause you to toss and turn during the night. And although these sound like ordinary symptoms of something as harmless as a cold, do not be fooled. Your fever could quickly transpire into extreme exhaustion, swollen glands, aching in your upper legs, slurred speech, and a rapid pulse. A few days into the disease, you will begin to notice swelling of the glands in your armpits, neck, or groin, also known as buboes. This leads into tip number 2. Stay inside your house. I know that you may be wondering who, exactly, can contract this plague. You may even be hoping that, because you skipped that extra donut at breakfast, you may run a reduced risk of coming down with it. Sadly, this is not the case. The plague can and will infect anybody in its path, be it a human or an animal. During the Elizabethan era, the plague claimed the lives of nearly 1/3 of the population. The few physicians who dared to try to help out a victim were forced to wear masks and thick clothing to prevent contact with the disease. The Black Death was extremely contagious for everyone, and still will be if it makes its way into the heart of Pennsylvania. It was spread by the Elizabethans by something as simple as a cough, sneeze, or whisper in your ear. Now, I know that I've been mentioning the Elizabethan era a lot lately, and you may be wondering why it even affected Queen Elizabeth. The Queen was terrified of catching the plague. She was, in fact, so afraid that she isolated both herself and her courtiers, moved her court to Windsor Castle, and built gallows to hang people coming from London, the height of the plague. The heart of the plague. She even put a stop to imported goods to ensure that the plague would not reach her. For the last minute we have left of this news broadcast, I will inform you of when the plague finally ended in Europe. It lasted for about a year, and because it began in 1563, it ended in 1564. The Black Death worked as a wake-up call for the citizens of Europe and reminded them all of just how mortal they really were. Do we want this to happen right here in Pennsylvania? Of course we don't. We must start to act now, however, before it is too late and we begin to develop signs of the plague.